Hello and welcome to the fifth video interview. It is a part of the ECMI series, ECMI Conversations with Experts. And for each of the installment, for each episode of our series, we invite an expert in the field of minority studies to discuss a specific topic which is of interest, of importance to one of ECMI researchers. My name is Sergiusz Bober. I'm a senior researcher at the European Center for Minority Issues, and I'm delighted to have here today with me my colleague, Dr. Rejhan Bosnjak. Hello, Ryan.
Hey, Sergiusz. Thank you for having me here.
Hey, we will discuss issues related to the Danish minority and its identity. Briefly about Ryan first, though. So Ryan was born in 1986 in Bosnia and Herzegovina. He came to Denmark in 1992. He has MA in History and the Study of Religions from the University of Southern Denmark. He finished his studies in 2015, and after that, he got enrolled on a PhD program. He was a PhD candidate at the University of Southern Denmark, his home institution, and Dansk Centralbibliotek, which is the research center connected to the Danish minority and located here in Flensburg, Germany. Ryan drafted a PhD dissertation on the self-perception of the Danish minority and tried to locate his text in a contemporary debates important for this particular community. All this ended successfully in November 2020 when Ryan defended his thesis, and more or less a year afterwards, a book based on the thesis was published by the University Press of Southern Denmark. The title can be translated as The Changing Danishness, Danish Minorities' Self-Perception. And this is the content that we are going to discuss with Ryan today. Of course, it is needless to say that those issues are of significant importance for ECMI, mostly because our center is, of course, very much anchored in the Danish-German border region where the Danish minority lives. On the German side of the border. But this is not only about the location of ECMI. Of course, the center is very intensely cooperating with, among others, Danish minority, one of the minorities based here in the region. We are frequently participating in projects together. We invite members of the minority to our events, like, for example, our annual summer school. So this is very much a topic of a significant interest for the center. I think that with all this background information, we can proceed to the actual interview. And I think that even though both of us know a bit about the Danish minority, perhaps we should not assume a vast knowledge concerning this topic among our audience. So perhaps, Ryan, if you could very briefly tell to our viewers, listeners, share with our viewers, listeners, let's say, basic information concerning Danish minority. Where does it live? I mentioned Northern Germany, but it's a particular part of the country. Do we have any demographical data in a broader sense of the word? What is the basic infrastructure that the minority is? So if you would be so kind to give us a bit of the background information.
Yeah, of course. And first of all, thank you for this very fine introduction. And as I said, it's a pleasure to be here today. So the Danish minority was a result of the two plebiscites in 1920, which created the Danish minority, so to say. It is located in what we call South Schleswig, and it's located more directly to the Danish-German borderlands. The minority itself consists of about 50,000 people. This is a qualified guess and cannot be tried to question due to some declarations that were made between the two states of Denmark and Germany. The minority have their own institutions, cultural, political institutions, and also their own newspaper, Flensburg Avis, which through they can maintain their cultural identity and their community. So this is, I mean, the basic stuff about the minority.
Yeah, many thanks for this brief but very comprehensive overview, and I think that it already indicates how rich is the institutional life of the minority. You also referred to the Flensburg Avis, the newspaper of the minority, where a lot of debates take place. So you decided, as it was mentioned previously, to look scientifically at this particular community and its self-perception. And before we proceed to the findings of your research, I would like to ask briefly about the approach you've taken. What kind of research techniques you used in order to produce this wonderful volume?
Yeah, so I basically used both quantitative and qualitative methods. I made a large research survey in which I had about 45 questions directed to the Danish minority members to different aspects of the self-perception. And this was my main source, so to say. And through the survey, I got about 1,625 answers back, and this was the main frame, so to say. Other than that, I did some qualitative interview with different people from the minority, as to maybe go a bit deeper with some of the aspects and some of the results that I found within the survey. And the last part of my methodology was I was taking the debates within the Danish minority newspaper Flensburg Avis, took those debates and made a discourse analysis on the different aspects. And so to say, I tried to combine these different aspects as to give a full picture of the different aspects of the self-perception within the minority.
Yeah. So the first step, the first area for which you used all those different methodological and theoretical tools, because of course there is a significant background literature you had to deal with. So the first aspect was, let's say, the profile in a way of the average member of the Danish minority. So we can perhaps try to answer this basic question: who are members of the Danish minority? How, for example, how intense is their feeling concerning the belonging to the community? How much the fact that they belong to the Danish minority is present in their everyday life? Family backgrounds, you cover family backgrounds, another very interesting aspect. Social context in which the fact that someone is from the Danish minority becomes important. So what can we say about this aspect of the profile of the Danish minority?
Yeah, as you have already mentioned it shortly, it's complex. The minority consists of a lot of different people from different social backgrounds and from geographical backgrounds as well. And the minority is both an known and an unknown group. Due to the institutions, we have the members of the institutions, and thereby they are the known number and members of the minority. But you also have a large sector of people who are seeing themselves as a part of the minority, but aren't members of any of the institutions. So they're the unknowns ones, and those are the people who are interesting for my research, because they might have some views and attitudes to identity and to the self-perception that the normal minority members might not have, or the institutional level might not have. So as to the geographical background, well, first of all, there are those people who have lived in South Schleswig for generations and who have been a part of the minority for generations. They are, of course, the South Schleswian, we call them. And the other factor that I found was that a lot of Danes come to the minority context and get work here in the area and become a part of the minority. And the first, so to say, large group is the newcomers. Those are people from the German society, but also from elsewhere in the world. I mean, the rest of the Europe and the world, who has no connection to the area and no connection to the minority, but still decides to become a part of the minority through sending their kids to the minority school or active engaged in the minority. So you have a broad scale of people who also in respect to intensity, also are very relative, because you have some members who are really close to the minority and who grasps this minority identity in a full, so to say, and really understand what it means to be a part of the minority. And on the other hand, you have those members who are not so intensive connected to the minority. I mean, they might see themselves as a part of the minority, but they're not engaged in the minority. They don't even maybe know the Danish language, but again, still sees themselves as a part of the minority. So yeah, there is a difference in the intensity level of affiliation with the minority. And of course, this makes things complex. And in my book and my dissertation, that was also one of the reasons that I did not want to ask this traditional question, are you a Dane or a German? Because I believe that it doesn't make any sense anymore, because most people who are in this area have both backgrounds, so to say, with them. And I was more interested in finding out, again, how connected are they, and how this connection expressed itself in daily life, so to say.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because as you said, there is this complexity and wide array of perceptions related to identity, family backgrounds, the intensity of feelings concerning the belonging to the minority community. And in the text, you are doing something very interesting, because you project this plurality, if I can call it this way. You project this against certain kinds of discourses important for the internal life of the minority, discourses that are very much public and present in the minority language media, mostly Flensburger-Wies. And in relation to the question concerning who are members of the Danish minority, you mentioned three of those. One is concerning the minority as it's a negative discourse, I would say, as a community of users. So there are persons who are coming to the minority just to use certain aspects of minority life. There is a discourse concerning obligations, and then finally discourse concerning the citizenship. And could you perhaps say in how those discourses are actually perceived by the persons that were caught by your analysis, by your questionnaire?
Yeah, of course. So yeah, as you said, the first narrative turns around the idea that the minority is seen as a supermarket, and everyone in the minority is a user, so to say. And it's a discourse and a narrative that has been there for, I would say, like the last 3 or 4 decades. So it's a discourse that is relevant and that is strong, so to say, within the minority. And it's also a discourse that is primarily labeled or expressed firstly at the institutional level. I mean, the institutional leaders have this perception that a lot of minority members today use the minority only for their own benefits and not for the larger community. So I was interested in finding out how those normal minority members, so to say, viewed the discourse, because it often occurs in the minority newspaper, Flensburger Wies, in debates. But when those topics are debated, it's a certain sector of the minority that debate them. I mean, it's the leaders, it's the functionaries of the minority, and not so much the normal members. And what I found out about this narrative is that the narrative is actually widespread and thoroughly rooted in the Danish minority. And there is disagreement, however, there is a disagreement as whether this is positive or negative. While most people within the minority see this kind of behavior or this discourse as in negative terms, you have some who say, well, this is just the development of the society and also of the minority, and we have to accept it, and we have to do something about it. Yes, but it is not so negative as you maybe want to make it. So again, yeah, there's a disagreement that there is something about this narrative, and it holds some truth, but whether or not this is actually positive or negative, there's a disagreement in the minority itself.
Mm-hmm. Can we say something similar about the discourse concerning obligations? Because against this plurality is sometimes perceived by minority elites, if I can put it this way, as sort of weakening in a way the activity of the members of the minority. So is it similar dynamics concerning this particular discourse?
Yeah, it is. So to say, I mean, this obligation discourse is one of the most pervasive and ongoing discussions about the Danish minority, and it stresses the fact that you have to be actively engaged in the Danish minority. You have to take part in the institutional life. You have to learn the Danish language. You have to read the refugee and so on. And it is primarily directed to the new members of the minority, so to say, and to the young generations, because again, at an institutional level, there's a perception that the young people of the minority don't understand this obligation or don't want to take this obligation to themselves. And also, it's also stressed out to the new members that you have to be engaged. That's a part of the minority, and that's what it means to be a part of the minority. And yeah, just as was with the case with the supermarket narrative, this narrative of commitment is also widespread within the minority. I think in my figures, it's about just 8 out of 10 agree that belonging to the minority entails an obligation, while almost every 10th disagree. So yeah.
It's a strongly internalized within the minority. And the final aspect within this particular sector of the section of the interview concerns the discourse on citizenship. It's very interesting because I think that at first sight, it shouldn't have been something that creates a lot of internal debates and oppositions within the community. In a way, the possibility of obtaining the citizenship of a kin state perhaps should not be seen as something problematic. But on the other hand, it was very much problematized within the community. And can you say a few words about this particular idea and why it has become so controversial, if I can put it this way, within the minority, Danish minority?
Yeah, of course. So some years ago, it was actually the cultural institution of the minority, the SSF, Sydslesvigsk Forening, who proposed to the Danish politician that minority members should be able to get a double citizenship and thereby also getting the Danish citizenship. And this was actually greatly received by every politician in the Danish parliament, so to say. But the issues occurred when the Danish state wanted some demands on who could obtain a citizenship, and it was those 5 demands, so to say, which was the problem, because not everyone could get a citizenship. You had to one of the most problematic was that you have to have 3 or 4 generations family members within the minority, which a majority of today's minority members don't have. You have to have 10 years of work within the institutions and so on. So this created a great debate within the minority as to whether or not there would be an A team and a B team within the minority, where only the few lucky ones could get the citizenship and then become more Danish than the rest of them. So, I mean, from a scientific point of view, there isn't anything new or anything unusual about that. The kin states want to have some demands on whether or not who should be a part of the state society, because it's good for the kin state itself, but it's also good for the minority, because then not everyone would just become a part of the minority to get some benefits in Denmark. So it's nothing unusual. That I think it was just that those demands, or what you can call them, from the Danish state, was so unfair, some would say, within the minority, that it triggered a debate. And it was actually a debate which included a lot of normal minority members, which is a bit unusual, actually.
Yeah, as opposed to other debates where
Exactly.
mostly minority elites are taking
exactly
part. Yeah, but it's interesting because I think that the issue of citizenship is very much linked to the core of the minority identity here in the region, which is based on the right to a free self-identification. And then the Danish side tried to verify in a way certain aspects of this by proposing criteria that have to be met. I think that any discussion concerning minority issues and minority communities cannot take place without references to the issue of languages, sometimes languages, sometimes language. But actually, in the case of Danish minority in South Schleswig, the linguistic plurality is, I think, something very much prominent. So if you could say something about this very important identity marker, what is the linguistic profile of the minority, Danish minority? Of course, as the name suggests, the assumption might be that the Danish minority speaks only Danish, but how the situation looks in a real life on the ground.
Yeah, so the main narrative that the institutional level wants to get out is that, as you said, this is a Danish minority and we speak Danish. So there is an ideal that every member of the minority should speak Danish. But if you go down into the data, you'll see that the reality is far more complex. The Danish minority members speaks a variety of languages, as you said, mentioned Danish, German, English, Polish, Turkish, and so on and so on. So the profile within the Danish minority regarding to language is that for a majority of the minority members, their home language is German, and it has always been historical. So there's nothing new about it there. The Danish aspect is located to specific situations. And I would say that in my research has found out that Danish is an institution language. It is first and most used within the institutions when there's an event going on or when the members meet within the institutional frame. That's where the Danish language is used. And if you want some of the higher posts within the institution, you have to speak Danish. That's a criteria. And of course, what has defined the minority within the last 2 decades, I would say, is that a lot of new members have come to the minority, especially from the German society. And those people cannot speak Danish. And so, again, this is there's a discomfort between reality and ideal, because ideally they want to speak only Danish within the institutional frame as well. But the reality is that they have to adjust themselves and also speak German, because some minority members who participate in those different events only speaks German.
And in terms of the minority community itself, not only the institutions and its let's say official aspirations, but in terms of the community, how important is language in terms of self-perception? Do members of the minority, Danish minority, believe that you should have Danish in order to be a legitimate member of the community, or this plurality concerning languages is also reflected in relation to this aspect?
No, I would say that it means a lot. I mean, the language is definitely important for the self-perceptions, and this goes throughout the whole minority, every aspect of the minority. And I have taken this question on a general level, but I have also looked at the different age groups within the minority, and it's actually interesting because it's those younger people who are laying more stress on that you have to learn and speak Danish to be a part of the members of the Danish minority than the older generations. And that was something that I have not expected to find out. I would have expected that the young generations are, I don't know, maybe more global in their views and maybe say, okay, language doesn't play as a big role to the feeling of being a part of the minority. But actually it was the other way around. So this also showed that at these narratives at the institutional level have great success of, so to say, bringing them on to the minority members, because they take these narratives to themselves and they incorporate these narratives in their own self-perception. And the thing about language is that it is the most important identity border to the German society, because there are no difference between the majority and the minority in regards to ethnicity, in regards to religion, in regards to name, so to say. So language is the border where it's most visible. And therefore it is so highly stressed by the institutions, and also because they believe that it is through the language that you get to learn the Danish culture, the Danish history, the Danishness, so to say. So it's a very important question for the minority, and it's an aspect that have been debated since the birth of the minority.
Yeah. Referring back to the issue of discourses, this is also very much present in the discussions, that take place within the Danish minority. So the language issue, and sometimes when following this, one can get the impression that the very survival of Danish in South Schleswig is under risk, under threat. Would that be the case, or it's too much of an emphasis of the crisis?
I would say the latter. It's a too much emphasis of the latter, because it is, like, once again, on the institutional level, it's the negative aspects of the language and the use of language which are being stressed. So mostly these debates occur when there's a specific situation within one of the institutions. I don't know, a mother who complains that they're being taught too much German within the football club, or parents who come to the school and wants to have a meeting in German, not Danish. And these debates are then, these concrete situations are then lifted up to a more general level about concerning the relationship between identity and language. So it is from the beginning the negative aspects that dominate these debates. And it has been so for, exactly as I said, since the birth of the minority. But once again, in my research, I have maybe tried to make this picture a bit more complex by asking those normal minority members what their perception of this was. And you have actually people who are saying the opposite, that actually there are many more members of the Danish minorities today that speaks the Danish language than it was the case for, 3, 4, 5 decades ago. And when I asked the minority members how often they speak Danish, we see that it's 75% of them speak Danish daily, on a daily basis. So once again, this there is discomfort between the narratives and the way you picture things and reality. So yeah, no, the negative element is present and is dominating, but there are also some who are stressing those positive aspects of the language, and that the Danish language is actually thriving today.
Which probably says a lot about the strength of the school structure of the Danish minority, where the education in Danish is provided, and in a way produces fluent speakers of the language. But next to language, another important feature of many minority communities, not all, of course, but many minority communities, is the relationship with the kin state. And here in your book, one can also find a series of very interesting insights concerning the relationship of the minority community and the kin state, so the perceptions of Denmark. Could you say a few words about the ways the members of the minority community feel about the kin state? Because we can assume, I think, without much of a risk, that this feeling must be there and there is some level of intensity. But what aspects are most important in terms of the bond to the kin state?
Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, since the demarcation in 1920, the minority has identified with Denmark, and in return, Denmark recognized the Danish group south of the border as ours and a part of the Danish culture. I have looked at this question from two perspectives. The first one is a more broad perspective when I ask about the minority members' feelings about Denmark. And the second perspective is where I have taken a time element in this and ask, have your view on Denmark changed in the last 5 years? So when we look at the general perspective, firstly, well, there is a great and positive and maybe a romantic view on Denmark. So a lot of members from the minority sees Denmark in positive terms. And I have asked which aspects that you have asked to are important. And it is actually not so much the official symbols of the minority, but it's actually the Danish values, the way that society is structured, the pedagogical in schools, and so on. So it is not so much this traditional view and history or so on, but it's more like these elements of values and so on. And a reason for this is that these are the elements which makes the minority different than from the German majority. And I think that's why they are so stressed and not those official symbols. And yeah, looking on the different, the other perspective as to whether there has been a change in the view of Denmark in the last 5 years, we see that for a majority within those members, there has been a shift, and it's actually more in a negative, in negative terms. And when I ask why this happens, well, it's basically the politics that the Danish state leads. I mean, it's this right turn in politics. It's the way that the crisis with the migrants were dealt. It's this closure about itself, this nationalistic trends in Danish politics, which are the main reasons for that. A lot of people have got a more negative view on Denmark within the minority.
Yeah. And in terms of continuing a bit on this, in terms of identity, because again, in the book there is this clear picture that from the side of the organizational structure of the minority, there is a clear understanding that the community is a part of the Danish community in general. But in your research, are there any aspects, traces, perhaps of something that is up to a certain degree distinguishable from the Danish identity, so in Denmark, so something may be linked to the regional aspects of identity? Is this visible in your research?
Yeah, it is, and it is on several levels. When I ask these people about some of those narratives, we can see that not all minority members accept those narratives from the institutional level. Some have their own narratives, and in those narratives, it's the regional aspect that has been stressed out as, we are a Danish minority, but we are not Danes, and we will never be Danes, because we also have a German element or a Schleswigan element in us. So this comes true. And also regarding this kin-state relationship, I have asked whether or not that some political or cultural or other development in Denmark could lead to that they would not longer be a part of the Danish minority. And there's a majority who says no. There are no development could trigger any difference in the relationship to the minority. And this also says about something, that the Danish minority identity is something else than the one that the Danes have north of the border.
Yeah, thank you. I think we have time constraints, so we will slowly move towards the concluding part of our interview. And in terms of a final question, or maybe something that we can workingly call final reflection, I would ask you, Rejhan, to offer some thoughts on, because throughout the book it's very visible that we have two opposite, up to a certain level, overlapping, but also opposite in some context, discourses, let's say, perceptions of the Danishness and the Danish minority and its identity. So we have this, let's say, idealistic model that is being promoted by the institutional framework standing behind the minority. So very strong emphasis on language, Danish identity, Danish culture, Danish values, with not much of a hyphenated identities, realities, and pluralities of different kind. But of course, with understanding that all this is happening in the wider context of the German society. And then on the opposite side, in a way, is all this broad phenomenon, complex phenomenon of the social reality on the ground concerning the community. So openness towards other languages, a significant intake of new members from the surrounding society, which would be the German minority, and all this leads to different types of pluralities in terms of identity, linguistic perceptions, but also intensity of the involvement in the minority life, and so on. So we have those dynamics that are sometimes clashing, sometimes they are meeting, sometimes they are clashing. So based on your research, can you offer any kind of informed guess, based, of course, on the significant work in terms of the future of the Danish minority? Where do you think the community might go?
Yeah. So what I did before I'll ask that I answer your question, just want to say another important aspect about the future, because one of my questions in the survey was whether or not there were some aspects that could be viewed as threats to the Danish minority. And I lined up several aspects in which I have found through my literature. And the most interesting is that it is the new members of the Danish minority, and they're not being engaged in the Danish minority, and the question about the language, that the Danish language is not used enough, which are seen as the biggest threats. So once again, it is connected to these narratives that is there in the Danish minority. So the last chapter in my book, I do some reflection about the future of the Danish minority. And I must say that these are subjective thoughts, which I have based, of course, on my research, but once again, I cannot know the future. And I have two scenarios for the Danish minority. The first scenario is that it would be an institutional, all the institutions would with time disappear, and maybe the only institution that would be left is the educational institution, because the narratives are there and they're accepted and incorporated by the minority members, but there is a disagreement between attitudes and actions. So the Danish minority members don't live out those narratives, and this might be a huge problem for the minority, because maybe you should have focused somewhere else, and I will return to that later. So one of the scenarios is that you have a group of people who identify themselves as Danish and as a part of the Danish minority, but you don't have an institutionalized minority. And this would, of course, create some questions about the definition of minorities and how to maintain this Danishness, and how to ensure that you are, with time, not assimilated in the greater society. And the other scenario that I put out is that the minority, so to say, acts on their views. And thereby I mean that though if they want to have a true Danish minority with the Danishness and Danish language, there should be more consequence about setting up some criteria about who can be a member of the Danish minority, and make sure that these criteria are met. And if not, well, in the worst case scenario, that these people cannot be a part of the Danish minority. This, of course, would lead to some consequences which can be hard to figure out what the result would be. But in any case, this would be a much smaller Danish minority. It would only be the core. Once again, there's a question about whether this minority would survive or not, because the Danish minority today needs newcomers, outcomers to survive. So, and once again, what would the majority society say to a minority who close on itself and who isolates from the rest of the society? Those would also be some issues that the minority should deal with. It may sound really skeptical, but I think that the main sorry, I lost the word. The main threat to the Danish, or the main challenge to the Danish minority, is how to integrate new members into the minority life. Not only just through narratives and discourses, but how to engage these people. Because I believe that it is through engagement that the narratives will also eventually come. And thereby you have a connection between attitudes and actions. So that would be my, so to say, solution to the problem. But luckily, I'm not the one who is living the minority life. It's up to the minority themselves to find out which way and which direction the future should go.
Yeah, of course. I think both of us are lucky in this respect that we don't have to, in a real sense, answer this question and respond to those kinds of challenges. But yeah, I also remember from the book that in some of the quotations from the in-depth interviews or voices in the debates, from the debate pages of Flensburg-Avis, some members were mentioning the need for more engagement, more forward, more of the forward-coming initiatives on the side of the minority in order to consolidate the community in a way.
Yeah, of course, because there's not much good in knowing the importance of the language if you cannot speak the language. There's not much there's not much use in knowing the importance of engagement if you're not engaged. So there has to be done something at that point of level.
Yeah. So yeah, some kind of a work towards the consolidation of the community, but most certainly with the preceding reflection concerning, what the best way forward might be, are the things that we should be looking at in the future. And since we are approaching the end of our interview, I can only express the hope on my side that in years to come, you will be closely monitoring those developments because the future scenarios that you just briefly described and which are presented in more detail in the book are absolutely fascinating. So I think all those challenges definitely deserve, as I said, close monitoring and, of course, structured, scientific and theoretically grounded reflection. And this book is just a promise in a way as well. It's a great research piece in itself, but also, it just brings more of the appetite for the future projects concerning similar questions linked to the Danish minority. So thank you so much, Rejhan. It was a pleasure to listen to you. There's really a lot of points you made that just deserve closer reflection and further reflection. And as I said, I think this should lead to at least several brilliant future research initiatives, and hopefully we will be able in some years to host you again in order to present us the follow-up reflections concerning some of the issues that we briefly tried to cover today. So thanks again. It was a great pleasure. I hope it was as well for our viewers. Thank you for your time. Of course, please follow ECMI on our social media. Please visit our website. The address is www.ecmi.de. The interview with Rejhan will be available online during the next few days, so you can always return to this, listen to the parts you found most interesting, even maybe use it as a source of quotes for your own research. And please stay tuned for the next episode of our conversations with experts. And until then, goodbye from my side. And once again, thank you very much, Rejhan, for your time today. Bye-bye.
Thank you too. The pleasure was mine.